Howdy folks, and welcome back to Mingles with Jingles, episode 72. Starting off as usual with what's new in the world of games this week. Elite Dangerous have just announced that the price of the game on release is going to be £39.99, or $59.99, or €49.99, whatever you divide euros into. I don't know. However, they have also announced that there is a pre-ordered digital pack, the Elite Dangerous Mercenary Edition, a bonus pre-order game collection stuffed full of digital extras, and it's on sale now from the Elite Dangerous store, and it's cheaper, significantly cheaper than the final release version of the game. You can get it for either £35, $50 or €40, and it includes, well, this is the Eagle Fighter, parked at a separate location from where you start, so you'll have to make your way to it before you can actually claim the thing in the game. But yeah, a pre-release version of Elite Dangerous with more stuff than the full version of Elite Dangerous, and cheaper than the full version of Elite Dangerous. I think they're probably going to sell a couple of copies. So, what's new in Star Citizen? A surprisingly large amount, actually. Arena Commander version 0.9 is finally out, and they've added quite a lot to the game. It's nice to see some solid actual progress being made on Star Citizen, rather than just reading about what is, in development. Actually able to get your hands on and see where all the work has gone. 4 new hangars available. This is the top-of-the-line Revel and York hangar. It's like the business class lounge at Heathrow. And when I did my Star Citizen Arena Commander 0.9 video, I actually missed this entire section of the Revel and York hangar. There are more than one floors. Well, there's more than 2 floors. The elevator actually goes up another floor. And then you've got this sort of executive lounge area at the top, which is nice. Unfortunately, all was not well with Arena Commander version 0.9. There were numerous bugs, which included not being able to get into one of the racing matches, and the cooperative Vandal Swarm, which was kind of ironic because they were the 2 major new multiplayer things that were actually included in Arena Commander 0.9. What was happening was that when you reached the top of the queue, the system would be trying to put you into matches that were already in progress. You're not allowed to join a race or a Vandal Swarm co-op mission that's already in progress, so you'd sit there in a queue for 10 minutes, reach the top of the queue, and then it would tell you match not found and dump you all the way back to the start. Well, it didn't take them long to patch it. I do have to say this in their defence. They have been working night and day to get this fixed, and as they should. It's the major feature of 0.9 and it wasn't working. It was a big old patch. I'm not entirely sure of the size, but I was downloading at 4 megabytes a second, and it took me 10 minutes. It's a big patch. Unfortunately, it's still not quite working. I decided I wanted to try my hand against some actual players in one of the racing modes, and made it to the top of the queue, and no match found. Alright, I'll try again. Different map this time. So instead of Old Vanderval, we'll go for the Rickard Memorial Raceway. Here we go. Alright. Okay, so we'll try another map. What's the next one? The Defford Link. Launch the match. No match found. Well, okay. Let's give Old Vanderval a try again. It's the default selection that pops up when you... oh, we're getting there. This is the default map that pops up, so naturally it's the one that most people are going to be queuing for. Yes, I've made it in. Fantastic. You see, persistence does pay off. It does work eventually. I'm really happy they've been working around the clock to fix all the connection issues with the 2 brand new game modes that are the whole purpose of unveiling patch 0. This looks suspiciously like my hangar again. So, Star Citizen, Arena Commander 0.9. Nice one, Chris. Call me again when it actually works. Meanwhile, over in War Thunder, Gaijin are hard at work with the development of patch 1.43, and as with every major content patch in War Thunder, you're going to see new tanks, new aircraft, changes to flight models, changes to damage models, a new map, the first urban map that we're going to see in War Thunder for the ground forces. It's based on a Polish border town. New sounds, all sorts of new stuff, but of particular interest to me is something that I didn't think I was ever going to see. At least not outside of a third-party mod, in the same way that I use Tank Inspector to get a much more detailed look at the armour and actual stats of tanks in World of Tanks. What War Thunder are doing is building the exact same functionality into the hangar interface in War Thunder itself. And they're taking it one step further. Not only are you going to be able to see the exact armour layout of all the tanks that you have in your garage, which will aid you in knowing exactly where to shoot these things, but also you can see the internal module layout. So, for example, you'll finally know exactly where to aim at a Panzer III in order to hit the ammo rack. And then, of course, there's World of Tanks patch 9.3, which has been on the test server for, well, over a week now, and is definitely going to be hitting the live servers very, very soon. I won't bore you with talking about World of Tanks patch 9.3 and Mingles with Jingles. I've done 7 World of Tanks 9.3 test server videos so far, more to come. However, the one thing that I am able to report about patch 9.3 in Mingles with Jingles is that sadly the ricochet system does not allow you to bounce shots off multiple tanks for the comedy value alone. I put a video up a couple of days ago demonstrating how you could bounce a shot off one tank to hit another tank in World of Tanks patch 9.3. Unfortunately, that's all you get. It'll only bounce once. So, trying to line up 4 mouses in a square on Malinovka and fire at one tank and have your shot bounce 3 times and then hit the tank that actually fired the shot is just, unfortunately, not possible. And that makes me very, very sad. One of the other features that was supposed to, isn't coming in patch 9.3 anymore, was to do with the whole system of tanking damage. Experience rewards for tanks that take hits so that the rest of the team doesn't have to. Something that I have mentioned in the past as being a good idea. I mean, there's been any number of games where I've been in a top tier heavy. Well, not necessarily a top tier heavy, or any well-armoured tank in the match in which I found myself. Going up front with everybody hiding behind me and just bouncing hit after hit after hit, but being unable to penetrate the targets I was shooting at. In tanks like the Black Prince, for example, which has got great armour, but the gun isn't that good. And, you know, and the team basically winning the position that we were in because I was there, absorbing hits for them. But you don't get anything out of it. There's no, you know, the experience and credit that you get is almost totally a function of how much damage and kills that you get. And so thinking that this whole system of gaining experience for just tanking damage I thought was a really, really good idea. They haven't managed to get it working in the correct way, and so it's not making its way into patch 9.3. It's something that they're going to fine-tune. I don't know what the exact problem was. I'm not sure they know what the exact problem was, but something was going wrong, and people were coming out of games with like 5,000 base experience, purely from damage, you know, potential damage taken. So, here's the thing though. Quickie Baby has a completely different view. And listening to his reasoning on why he thinks it's not a great idea, well, I'm not going to go so far as to say I'm inclined to agree with him, but I can definitely see his point. For a start, this sort of thing is open to abuse. At the moment, the single most efficient way of gaining experience and credits in World of Tanks is to jump into a tank. The second the countdown hits 0, just drive straight towards the enemy base. The second you see something, start shooting at it, die, and then do the same thing again in another tank. Your stats will be horrifically bad, but you will gain experience and credits at a phenomenal rate. You just keep doing that over and over again in as many tanks as you've got in your garage. You end up with a metric shit ton of free experience, convert it all, and within a couple of weeks you're at tier 10. Your stats, of course, will suffer, but you know you'll have tier 10 tanks. You won't have a clue how to drive them, but you'll have tier 10 tanks. Now, with this system in place, it would be even easier to earn XP and credits by doing this. Just imagine what it would be like if you were in a KV1 in a tier 5 match on Malinovka. You just drive into the middle of the field, angle your tank 45 degrees, go AFK. Come back at the end of the match, find out that you bounced 20 of the 25 shots that were fired at you, and by basically doing nothing, you've earned a respectable amount of experience and credits. This is the kind of way that this system could and would be abused. The other point, and this is the point that Quickie Baby was making, and one which I'm inclined to agree with and I don't really have an argument against, is that the reward for driving your tank intelligently and using your armour effectively, angling the tank, bouncing shots fired at you, should not be experience and credits. The reward should be your tank stays alive, you don't die, and you're able to kill enemy tanks because they're not killing you, and earning XP and credits by doing that. It's like giving medium tanks experience and credits for outflanking. Outflanking is not something that should earn you experience and credits. Outflanking is something that should allow you to get shots on tanks and kill them, which earns you experience and credits, in the same way that angling your tank properly in a heavy or something with decent armour shouldn't be something that directly earns you experience and credits. Angling your tank and effectively bouncing shots is something that allows you to stay alive longer in order to kill enemy tanks, and that is what should be earning you your experience. And it's kind of difficult to argue with Quickie Baby's point. And where exactly are we going to draw the line here? Are we going to start giving people bonus experience and bonus credits for getting shot at and not getting hit because the light tank drivers are complaining that they can't get bonus experience for bouncing shots with their armour? Or are we going to start giving people bonus experience and credits for successfully damaging enemy tanks without being detected, because then the tank destroyers are complaining that there's nothing for them? You know, it's a thin end of the wedge here. And yes, I know that there are light tanks that have great armour. AMX-40, I'm looking at you. And I know that there are tank destroyers that have great armour. Jagdpanzer E100, I'm looking at you. But, you know, I'm generalising here in order to just illustrate the point. And the point is, well, it's Quickie Baby's point. He makes the argument, and he makes it well, that if you're driving your tank intelligently, which is basically what this is, you've got a tank that has armour, and you use the armour well in order to deny the enemy team the opportunity to kill you, then that's its own reward, because your tank's still in the fight and you still have the potential to score damage and kill tanks, and that is where the XP and credits from driving a heavily armoured tank well, that's where it should come from, rather than directly giving bonuses just for getting shot at and not dying. And I realise that there are so many different tanks in World of Tanks, with all different kinds of combinations of armour effectiveness and gun performance, that it's going to be very easy to point to one particular tank as an example. Black Prince, for example, or what's that premium tier 5 British heavy tank? It's mostly the British, the Excelsior, that's it. Fantastic armour, terrible gun. You know, something like this, Excelsior drivers are going to be rubbing their hands with glee, thinking, oh wow, yeah, I just angle the tank at 30 degrees or so and open my pockets and watch all the XP and credits flood in, because the gun on the Excelsior is terrible. It's an absolute waste of time. The armour on the tank, however, very, very good. Tanks like the Black Prince as well. You know, these are extreme examples, but they're very, very good examples of the kind of tanks that would profit immensely from this kind of change. Black Prince is another perfect example, you know, as are most of the Churchills. British tanks, British heavy tank drivers must be looking at this change in the patch notes and thinking, yes. I mean, I've played tier 9 games in the Black Prince, and bounced shots from M103s. No problem. I mean, it's not easy, but it's definitely doable. The Black Prince has the armour. Doesn't have the gun, though. It's very, very difficult to, you know, do a significant amount of damage in a Black Prince in a tier 9 match. So, you know, this is the sort of thing that Black Prince drivers in particular are going to be thinking, yes, where do I sign? And that was kind of my point, because, you know, there are, and again, mostly British heavy tanks, but not just the British. Tanks in the game that have very, very good armour and relatively poor gun performance by comparison. And I saw this change as being a way of kind of levelling the playing field for the kind of tanks that are basically there to take the hits so that nobody else has to, but aren't that good at actually doing damage. So, is this one of those things that when the first time you hear about it you think, oh, that's a great idea, why haven't they done this before? But then you start to think about it a bit more and you realise that the implications are actually not that good, and it's going to be wide open to abuse, and maybe it's not such a good idea after all. See what you think in the comments, because discussion is good. There's countless times I've heard something, thought, oh, that sounds like a good idea, and never considered the implications. And it's only until I've been talking about it with somebody else that I've heard an alternative point of view and thought, actually, yeah, you've got a point there. And the opposite is also true. Give you an example. Again, it's to do with Quickie Baby. And it's to do with premium ammunition in World of Tanks. Yeah, that old can of worms. That's right, we're going there. Talking about, perfect example, medium tank like the Comet, British Tier 7 medium tank. It's fast, it's manoeuvrable, it's not particularly well armoured, but it's got a very good gun mantlet and good gun depression, which means that you can use that, if you're using the Comet properly, to work ridgelines while being relatively safe from return fire, and able to put effective fire into whatever's on the other side of the ridge, just by, effectively trolling them into shooting your gun mantlet, just making that the only part of the tank that you're actually giving them to shoot back at. The tank doesn't have a lot of armour, but it's an effective use of the armour that the tank has. Comet's very good in that sort of circumstance. What it's not so good at is if the tanks on the other side of that ridge are heavy tanks. Tanks with good frontal armour, because the penetration on the Comet's gun isn't fantastic. Unless you're using premium ammunition. Now, I do use premium ammunition on my Comet, not because I'm any good, but because I'm crap. But a lot of very, very good players will use premium ammunition on their Comet because they get themselves into that sort of situation where they've got tanks in front of them that they just cannot effectively penetrate with the standard ammunition on the Comet's gun. And so they save some premium ammunition for when they get into situations where the tank's in front of them, big heavy tanks, IS-8s for example, that they just cannot hope to penetrate with regular ammunition. Now, my argument is that if there was no premium ammunition in the game, you wouldn't put your tank into that kind of position. You'd shoot his tracks off, you'd drive around his side, and you'd shoot him in the side and rear, where your gun can penetrate, and you'd do it in company with other medium tanks, bit of teamwork. Medium tank wolf packs. And a lot of people who drive Comets, and this is just one example of the kind of gameplay style I'm talking about. I'm not picking on the Comet for any particular reason other than using it to illustrate a point. A lot of people who drive Comets will not use premium ammunition with it, and they're good players, and they don't stop being good players just because they're not able to put shots through the front of IS-3s by using premium ammunition. They use the tank in a different way. They don't put the tank into the kind of situation where they're going to be forced to trade shots with heavily armoured tanks from the front, because they're in a medium tank. They drive it like a medium, rather than using premium ammunition to play it as a substitute heavy when you're in situations when you're shooting at the front of heavily armoured tanks. Now, of course, the counter-argument to that is, well, premium ammunition is in the game, and it's not going away. And if you can use premium ammunition, and you don't use premium ammunition, you're crippling yourself when you do get into the kind of situation where you have to take another tank on that might have good armour, and he's in front of you. And so that's why people will have a stock of premium ammunition in tanks like the Comet. Not because they're noobs, not because they're gold ammo scrubs, but because sometimes you just have to be able to put shots through the front of heavily armoured tanks. For one reason or another, the way the game plays out, you just end up in that sort of situation. And if you're alone against 4 enemy tanks, and you're in a Comet, and you don't have any premium ammunition, your options become very, very limited. It's all well and good saying, well, play it as a medium tank, drive around the flanks and rear. Sometimes that is just not an option. There are good players on the enemy team as well. And, they're not stupid. They know you're in a fast medium tank, and they're not going to give you the opportunity to, exploit the medium tank's advantages. In those situations, there's always premium ammunition. And again, you know, I'm using Quickie Baby as an example here because he obviously firmly believes that premium ammunition is in the game. People are going to be using it. If he's not using it, he's robbing himself of options for when he has to carry a game, when his team have been donkeys and they've left him with 4 enemy tanks to deal with. And if he didn't have that premium ammunition, it severely limits his options in how to go about winning that match. I obviously have the other point of view, that premium ammunition is evil and shouldn't be in the game at all. And if people didn't have premium ammunition to fall back on, then they would be forced to play the tanks in the way that the tanks were supposed to be played. Neither of us is right, neither of us is wrong, it's just different perspective of looking at the same issue. Although, to be completely fair to Quickie Baby, he's probably a bit more right than I am, because he is right. Premium ammunition is in the game, it isn't going anywhere, and my wishing it were otherwise is never going to make it so. So you may as well have some ready to use as situation demands it. And Quickie Baby does use premium ammunition in the comment. Again, just using the comment as an example, far more sensibly than I do. I just spam it at everything because I'm a scrub. People have seen my replays in the comment where I've had the premium loaded and I've forgotten about it, and I'm actually using premium ammunition to blow cover away so I can take shots at KV-1Ss. Yeah, but it's interesting to see the two different points of view on the same subject. And I do realise that the subject of premium ammunition in World of Tanks is a very, very hot topic, and people get very, very passionate and excited and angry about it. So I'm always I'm not going to say very wary about raising the subject in an issue of Mingles with Jingles, because I love a good argument as much as anybody else. But yeah, what do you, again, another topic of discussion in the comments of the video, what do you guys think about the whole subject? Premium ammunition. Would you rather have World of Tanks with no premium ammunition in it? Bearing in mind that if they were to remove, I mean they're not going to, but just for the sake of argument, if they were going to remove premium ammunition, they probably have to rebalance some of the tanks, because there are undoubtedly some tanks in the game that have been built around the idea of premium ammo. Machines like, for example, the Death Star, the FV215B 183 with its HESH ammunition, and the Comet. You know, the Comet's another good example. Well, it's not a perfect example. People do very, very well in the Comet without ever firing a single round of armour-piercing composite rigid. They drive it like a medium tank. So what are your thoughts on the subject? And what tanks in World of Tanks do you think are basically gold tanks that are there purely for the purpose of firing gold ammunition? And flame war in the comments in 3, 2, 1, go! Oh, I will do anything to get a good comment count on a video. I'm such a scumbag. Actually, speaking of good comments, I don't know how many of you out there read the blog For the Record. It's a fantastic source of information on all things World of Tanks. For example, I just found out from reading For the Record, World of Tanks patch 9.3, the Chaffee, which used to cost 58,000 experience, is being reduced in price to something like, I can't remember the exact figure. But with the introduction of the new tier 6, 7, 8 light tanks, the Chaffee obviously no longer has a role as a high tier scout in tier 10 matches, so it's no longer an end-of-line tank, so it doesn't cost 58,000 XP anymore. I can't remember how much it costs, but it's something like less than 20,000. Well, that's great news if you're thinking of getting a Chaffee. It's not such good news if you already have a Chaffee. What about all that experience that we paid to unlock this bloody tank? And they're reducing the price by more than half. Well, from reading For the Record, I found out that you're actually going to get the difference not as free experience, which is what happened when the German tanks lost their 1200 horsepower engines. Because those were some expensive engines. There was something like 24,000 XP to research, and that was given back to us as free experience. They gave it to us as free experience because the engines were no longer in the game. The Chaffee is still in the game. So what they're doing with the Chaffee is, if you already have a Chaffee in World of Tanks, when patch 9.3 comes out, the difference in cost between how much you paid for it and how much it now costs as far as experience is concerned will be given to you as experience on the Chaffee. So it basically gives you a head start in getting the new tier 6 light tank, the T-37, or you can convert it to free experience, whatever you want to do. And I do spend a lot of time reading For the Record because he's full of, insider information like this. I don't know what his sources are, but he almost always gets it right. Link in the video description. Obviously, I'm spending a lot of time talking about the blog. The guy that writes it is he's a Czech gamer called Silent Stalker, and he's a fantastic source of information. I even get the occasional mention over there. There was a couple of days ago. There was a spot of insider information he had from. Again, he keeps his sources close to his chest, but some of the developers were saying that they occasionally watch people like PewDiePie. And as far as World of Tanks content uploaders are concerned, a lot of them really like and respect what I do, which was nice. These are the actual wargaming developers in Minsk. But the bizarre thing was the one thing that they didn't like was the nickname that I have for the Jagdpanzer E100. I call it the Jägeru. Seriously, out of everything that I have said and done and uploaded about World of Tanks, that's what they object to. Oh well, it could be worse, I suppose. Jägeru, that's what pisses them off. Well, actually, you have to say it in a bad Japanese movie accent. Jägeru. There you go. That's what winds them up. Okay. A lot of people in the comments section of that particular blog post were curious as to where the nickname comes from. It's from Pacific Rim. I can't remember exactly where I thought of it, but it was during a live stream with Quickie Baby, and he said something that made me think. So, technically you can blame Quickie Baby for the nickname as much as me. But it was the old Pacific Rim kaiju, the big monsters, because that's what the Jagdpanzer E100 is, isn't it? It's a big monster. So, Jaeger, German word for hunter. And Jaegers were also the giant robots in Pacific Rim, so I don't know, it just seemed right. The Jägeru is the new nickname for the Jagdpanzer E100. And that does actually piss a lot of people off, because I do that a lot. I come up with nicknames for other tanks. You've got the Flat Panzer for the Jagdpanzer 4, the Death Star, which I didn't come up with, for the FV215B183, and the Jägeru for the Jagdpanzer E100. And then, of course, there's Doom Turtle for the T95. And that really pissed somebody off. They had quite a rant about it in the comments of that blog post, blaming me for every time they take their T95 out for a random battle, everybody in chat are like, oh no, it's a Doom Turtle. And you're like, God damn it, Jingles. I didn't come up with that nickname. That's been around since long before I first started using it. I may have popularised it, but you can't blame me for that nickname. Sorry. I think I actually saw that one first on somebody else's YouTube video. It might even have been that famous YouTube video where somebody's in a T95 on Malinovka and they just say, screw it, full power to the engines, and then crawl forward right across the field of Malinovka, bounce about 40 shots, kills half a dozen tanks, and wins the game. And I think that may have been the source of the original nickname for the T95, the Doom Turtle, but that one was nothing to do with me. I get blamed for it, of course, but it wasn't me. Well, anyway, the reason why I'm making such a fuss about For the Record is, I think it's a fantastic source of information on World of Tanks, and it deserves to have a fuss made about it, but also because of a post that went up today, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. It was posted by a Finnish player called Kanti, and the post was entitled Understanding Red Players of Noobs and Kids. And it's a fascinating look into, well, what it's about is his son. His son plays World of Tanks. He taught his son to play World of Tanks a year and a half ago, when he was 5.5 years old. He's now 7 years old. He's played 3,320 games, and he's got a 49% win rate. 7-year-old, been playing since he was 5. Now, you might be thinking, win rate doesn't tell you anything. Hell, Jingles has got a 58% win rate, and that's only because he platoons with circumflexes and Quickie Baby. Yep, entirely true. The kid doesn't platoon with his dad. The kid plays his games alone. His dad might sit there and watch him play, but he doesn't platoon up with him. Of the over 3,000 games he's played, his dad's platooned with him maybe 100 times. The kid's done it by himself. Now, what makes this interesting is that 49% is it's an average win rate in World of Tanks. That means that the average World of Tanks player is as good at playing computer games as a 7-year-old. And it gets better. And this is something I've been saying for a long, long time, and it should be bloody obvious, but apparently it isn't, and it needs repeating. Just because somebody has terrible stats, it doesn't mean that they're going to be crap in every game that they play. And this kid's stats are pretty terrible. I mean, his average experience earned and average damage done, you shouldn't pay any attention to because he doesn't have access to high tier tanks. But his WN8 rating is pretty terrible. His kill-death ratio is pretty terrible. And yet, his father has, on a couple of occasions, been forced to take the kid along into ESL matches where they were missing a player. And the kid has destroyed blue players. You know, guys that have got win rates well into the 50s. I mean, they're not unicums, but they're not far off. In one occasion, alone in his T1 Cunningham on top of the hill in Himmelsdorf, he utterly kicked the arses of 2 other players who, according to their stats, were better than him in every respect. But what does this tell you? And the 3 major points that Canty was trying to illustrate with his story about his very, very young son were really, really bad players will surprise you in a good way from time to time. Just because somebody has terrible stats doesn't mean they're going to suck in every game that they play. Pick a terrible player from any random battle that you're in. Somebody with a really, really bad win rating, a really, really bad WN8 rating, go and have a look at their stats. They'll have a couple of ace tanker badges. They'll have some top guns. You know, even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day. Throw enough shit at the wall, some of it's gonna stick. The second point that Canty had to make was slightly more sobering. His son, who has been playing since he was 5 and he's now 7 and has a 49% win rate, is better than millions of people who play World of Tanks on a regular basis. Oh my god. It's not just World of Tanks, you know, it's any kind of online multiplayer game. There are lots and lots and lots of people playing the games that we all know and love who suck at them massive amounts. That so much that even a 7-year-old kid can make them look bad. And that isn't going to come as a surprise to anybody who plays online multiplayer games. But the third point that Canty had to make, and it was a very, very good one, and I'm just going to quote him directly from the blog here, and it's this. Young kids are playing World of Tanks, and there are quite a lot of them, as he didn't want to believe that there are not many teens or adults playing who are worse in average than his kid. Most of them are sincerely doing their best, but for fuck's sakes, they're just kids. What can you expect from them? They play using 1 or 2 fingers instead of the full WASD. They're only just learning to observe the battlefield. They like to shoot cars and houses. And at the moment, I mean, his kid is only just learning to read and he's already looking for a mod disabling private messages. He's tried to make it clear in his kid's nickname that he was born in 2007. There have been many, many times when he's been sitting watching his kid play, the kid's in the garage after a match, and a window pops up with somebody wishing that he died of cancer and telling him to go and learn to shoot because the kid's performance in the match that he was just in didn't meet the standards that this guy expected. Well, he's 7 years old. Oh, but I didn't know he was 7 years old when I sent the PM. And what kind of excuse is that? Wishing that somebody died of cancer. What is wrong with people? Now, I realise it often takes me a while to get to the point, but I do actually have a point here, and it's kind of related to what I was talking about in last week's Mingles with Jingles, talking about people who have below standard computers and they can't really run the game well enough to play well, or people who might have disabilities. They could have nerve damage in their hands and fingers, which makes it difficult for them to control a mouse and keyboard. Or they could be 7-year-old kids. So next time you're in a match and you're raging at the incompetence of your team, just stop and think before you open your mouth. Getting pissed off at your team's performance is fine. I get pissed off at my team's performance. I'm infamous for it on the live streams, and I get pissed off at my own performance just as much. But before you get vocal about it, just stop and think about who might be on your team and why they might be playing as badly as they do. It might be because they're 7 years old. And I don't care if you're 7 or 70, nobody deserves to have PMs pop up in their garage from arseholes wishing that they die of cancer. What amused me greatly, however, about this whole blog post on For the Record was the responses in the comments. And sure as eggs is eggs, there were people saying, a 7-year-old has got no business playing World of Tanks. Blah, blah, blah. Take your kids and stop them ruining my game, and so on and so on. Hang on a minute. He's not ruining your game. He's got a 49% win rate. That's average. And let us not forget that the average age of people playing World of Tanks is 29 years old. You're 29 years old and you're being outplayed by a 7-year-old. I think that's hilarious. And apparently other people in the comments agreed with me. This one in particular I thought was very amusing. There's absolutely nothing worse in life than giving 100% at work, going back home, logging in to have a bit of a game, playing the match of your life, giving it 100%, and have it all ruined by some tomato baddie that doesn't even have the minimap open and doesn't have the common sense to fire at the target before starting to turn his hull again. Well, there are probably things worse in life than that, but we'll roll with it for the sake of the argument. He then goes on to say, I'm sorry, but if a 6-year-old playing in tandem with an 8-year-old, personal experience of my own, one on the keyboard, one on the mouse, if a 6-year-old and 8-year-old can read a minimap correctly, have the patience to aim, a grown-ass man can do the same and not fuck it up for 14 other players. If I have to question myself on if you're part of animal testing for World of Tanks or not, just log off. You're making 14 people angry and sad, and you make me weep for mankind. So, okay, probably safe to say this guy has a couple of anger issues. And I know that we can all sympathise with him. I've posted heartbreaker games up on my World of Tanks videos on YouTube of guys that have played the games of their life, done monstrous amounts of damage and just not been able to carry their donkey team. But the ironic thing is that while this guy is making this exact point, he's using as an example his own kids, 1/6, 1/8, one controlling the keyboard, one controlling the mouse, driving one tank. So he clearly knows that there are small kids playing World of Tanks because he's used his own 6 and 8-year-old kid in the example, and yet he still cannot understand why his team can perform so badly. Maybe it's because there are small kids playing World of Tanks. Gee, I don't know. So I guess the point is, and this doesn't just apply to World of Tanks, it's whatever multiplayer game you play. Sometimes your team sucks, and sometimes you lose because of it. And sometimes your team sucks because they're just bad players. But sometimes your team sucks because they're 7 years old, or they have a disability, or their computer isn't up to scratch, and you have no way of knowing which one of those situations applies. So while it's all right to get angry about it, before you open your mouth and say something that would make your mother regret ever meeting your father, just stop and think about who it is you might be saying it to. The world that we live in is shitty enough without you going out of your way to make it even worse for other people. And on that sobering note, that's it for this week's Mingles with Jingles. Take care, folks, and I'll catch you next time.